So before we get started, let me just tell you about our guest today. First I want to talk about the book, which is only giving you 2 sentences because you really want to hear the author talk about it. It's been described as heartbreaking, sometimes heartbreaking, often funny, and always uplifting. You're a New York Times bestselling author, but this one illuminates how life's greatest joys are often hiding in plain sight. And I think if we didn't learn that from COVID, we didn't learn anything. Kristan is a best-selling author of over 20 novels, USA Today and New York Times bestseller lists, and these books have been translated into more than 24 languages and have sold millions of copies worldwide. She lives here in Connecticut with her husband, her 2 children, and a dog. But we're going to talk about Sonali's dog in a second, so you might want to change your, dogs plural. If you want to know anything about Kristan or when her next book is coming out, please check out her website at KristanHiggins.com, where you can sign up for all kinds of cool stuff, and you'll feel like you're BFFs before you even hit confirm. So I definitely recommend that. In conversation tonight, we have Sonali Dev, and she is a USA Today best-selling author. She writes Bollywood-style love stories that explore issues faced by women around the world. Her novels have been on the Library Journal, NPR, Washington Post, and Kirkus's Best Book of the Year lists. She has also won American Library Association's Award for Best Romance, the RT Reviewer Choice Award for Contemporary Romance, and multiple RT Seals of Excellence. She's also been a finalist, a Rita finalist, and been listed for the Dublin Literacy Award Shelf Awareness. Period. It's hard when you can't read, right? Shelf Awareness calls her not only one of the best, but one of the bravest romance novelists working today. She lives in Chicagoland, which I love because my son lives in Chicagoland, which must not be quite Chicago, with her husband, 2 visiting adult childs, and the world's most perfect dog. Yeah. See you, Kristan. So we're so grateful to have both of you here. I'm going to take my leave and turn it off to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Sonali, for moderating.
Oh my gosh, I would not miss it for the world. I am so excited to be here. I'm glad I've stopped crying long enough to be here, but
It was over the wedding pictures or over the book that you were crying?
Just as I was getting over the book, then I was weeping over the wedding. So thank you, Kristan, as always. But I also think it's so special because we've done an event at RJ Julia together, which was so fun. And that's when we met each other's families. And that was just such a great year because you came to Chicago and then I came there. And that whole traveling together and stuff was so fun. But this book, oh my gosh. So I think your books always, like, I feel like I'm reading them with my heart. Like there's no way not to, like there's no layer between what's going on the page and me. Like it's like a movie playing inside my heart. But this one swung me by the heart. I mean, it just took me from, and when you made me laugh, like the entire time, I knew you were in the middle of this wedding thing, so I wasn't madly like friend texting you while I was reading it, but I kept thinking, what are you doing to me, Kristan? And how are you doing this? Oh my gosh, I mean, how did you make me go for a laugh? Like I was like a hyena. I was crying one minute and hyena laughing the other. It just like swung me like a bat, woman. And I'm never going to forgive you for that. But
oh, hooray.
Yeah, right? Sorry, not sorry. But I want to talk about, there are scenes I want to talk about. I want to talk about all of that. But oh my gosh, like where did this come from? And this was your pandemic book. Like, where does this fit into everything?
Well, the book was born when I was writing my last book, Always the Last to Know. And in a desperate dash to finish that book, because I always, I write half of the book over 6 months and then the next half in 4 weeks. So I took the 4 weeks and I went up to Cape Cod, which is my second home. Our house was closed for the winter and I rented a little tiny house overlooking the ocean, which was the best possible place to write a book. Highly recommend. And it was frigid. It was February, which is the only reason I could have afforded this house. And I was taking a walk on the beach with my dog, Luther, who may join me in the chair soon. And I saw this guy, and he was standing at the water's edge. It was probably 12 degrees. The wind was blowing, and he just stood there like a statue looking out at the ocean. And my initial thought was, he looks like the loneliest man in the world. And I thought, and I want to write his story.
Wow.
And so I finished writing Always the Last to Know, which was its own emotional journey. And I got started thinking, I, like you, Sonali, we like to grab our readers by the heart. We like to bring them through the full spectrum of emotion, from hyena laughing to fetal sobbing, right? And
you got that right, like do the I've never fetal sobbed like that, but yeah, again.
So I felt like I would like to write a book, a beautiful love story that has a finite ending, in the fact that one of them will die. Because, I started in romance, of course, and I love writing love stories. All my books have love stories in them. But I thought, what about the people who have the love story taken away from them? What do you do then? And it wasn't quite the pandemic. And I also thought, what about you get a diagnosis like Lauren has, which in her case is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, IPF, kills more people in America than heart attacks, but nobody knows about it. And it's considered an old person's disease, but it's not. It can happen to anyone. And the word idiopathic means we don't know why you have this. So pulmonary fibrosis is a scarring of the lungs. The scarring continues until eventually you can't breathe and you die. And I thought, if you had a diagnosis like this, how do you continue living? How do you deal with the terror and the grief and the loss of your future, especially if you're newlywed? And my daughter wasn't engaged at the time, so I told her, you can't read this for a good 6 months. But I wanted to explore, how do you get that kind of blow and still live a joyful life? Because the clock is ticking. What are you going to do? You going to give up and just, be all about your illness? Or is there a way to make your last years the best years of your life? And that's what Lauren and Josh are able to do. So it's a story of loss, but it's also a story of joy. It's a story of their joyful marriage and how they handle this terrible diagnosis and the prospect of loss. And Josh is on the spectrum. He's never been great with people. So Lauren knows he's really going to struggle with this. It was hard enough to sort of like get him to fall in love with somebody and get him out of his shell. And now she's going to do the one thing she promised she would never do, which is break his heart. And so she writes him a series of letters. FYI, I don't know how it happened. I have never seen the movie P.S. I Love You.
I love it. Because isn't every review that now? It's
right. It was like, oh, it reminds me of P.S. I Love You. And one of my friends said that, and I'm like, I don't know that movie. And she's like, it's a Gerard Butler movie. Because I'm like, how did I miss it? But I deliberately didn't watch it till after. I still haven't seen it, actually. So Lauren writes Josh this series of letters to walk him through that year of grief. And she knows him so well, knows his limitations and his strengths. And she gives him a series of tasks. Each month, the letter has a job that he has to do. And she gradually leads him out of this year and kind of walks with him that first year. So their stories are told from the point of her death. Josh moves forward in time, and Lauren's tells her story backwards in time. So her last chapter is the day she meets Joshua. and realizes this is the man for me. So it's this beautiful, tortured, agonizing, uplifting, funny love story that ends, you know, from the first line of the book that she will die, but it has a happy ending. And I know that's a lot to claim, but I think it's true.
Yeah, and before I got on this, I'm like, I have to tone down the whole Kristan, you killed me with this thing, because truly, you know, the audience, it's a lot of, and you know, everyone here is a Kristan fan, I'm sure, who's listening. So you know what I mean when I say that her books change you, right? They kind of are not instructive as in meaning to be instructive, but there is this how to be graceful in situations, right? She's written about a lot about widowhood and, you know, and living and just being a good friend, being a good parent, what being a bad parent is in terms of impact at various levels, right? So there's always that, but I felt like this book was a lesson in how to die, which is a very strange thing to say, but I've had a very dear friend a few years ago die from something, and you know, and completely in contrast to this experience. So it was also this thing where I was kind of, you know, dealing with, if I were to do it, which one? And it's almost like this step-by-step painful and painstaking lesson in how to face death, which is something we think so little of in life, when that is the one sure thing in all of our lives. Right? So that was, I think, just incredibly brave, Kristan, to take that on. It was just incredibly brave, and I think that's in your character development, right? And so did what came to you was, I know Joshua probably came to you first because it was the man on the ocean. And so tell us a little. So there are two craft questions, which is probably not what the audience want to hear, or maybe it is that there are two craft questions, because I'm here to learn from the great Kristan Higgins for sure. So I'm gonna kind of, we say in India, wash my hands in the flowing Ganges, which is a river. So I want to know what that whole putting them together was for you as a storyteller. And I also thought it was really interesting how you did the structure. So did you write them both linear and then mesh the chapters? Like, what was that process like?
Well, the first part of your question is, how do you put these two characters together? And so my general rule of thumb is always, let's put the two worst people together. You know, the people who are worst for each other. So here's Joshua. He is a legitimate genius with many degrees. He's a medical device engineer. He's a millionaire before he's 20 years old. You know, he changes the world for the better through his inventions. And he's also on the spectrum, heavily on the spectrum. He's an only child. He doesn't know his father. He was raised by a single mother. And his life is very much tunnel vision. And then we bring in Lauren, who is the complete opposite. She's extroverted and funny, and she has, you know, this loving relationship with her family and friends, and, you know, she loves her job and her bosses, and, you know, she just is so vibrant and optimistic, and, you know, always laughing, always making friends on the street corner. And so as a couple, they're delightful because they are opposites attract, and that's always fun to have, you know. And the first time they meet, they don't like each other at all because of that. And then they meet again a few years later, and it's very different then. So I love that idea of, you know, we are two opposites that put together, we are perfect. The second question of why tell it the way I did was because both stories get happier as the book goes on, you know. So you're dealing, Lauren's opening chapter is writing to her late father, which is something very close to home. My dad died when I was Lauren's age, when her father died. And that sense of loss of the safety net in your life, which is for many women, your dad, the man who will take care of you and look after you and always be there for you, really profoundly affects her. And she starts writing letters to him in order to feel close to him. And her first letter says, I can feel it coming, Dad. My time is winding down, and this has been the happiest year of my life. And that is the question of, how do you pull that off? So, we meet Lauren when she's actually having a good day. It's their 3rd wedding anniversary, but she's been progressively getting sicker. To tell it backwards, she gets healthier,
Yes. Yeah.
and her disease becomes less intrusive and less heavy. And to tell her story backwards is to see where she came from, or where she was, this fully formed woman who is burnished to her truest self by her disease, because of her disease, and not defeated by it. I always hate those obituaries that say, Kristan lost her battle with cancer. It's like, maybe not. Maybe it made her her best self. And that's what happens with Lauren. Maybe because of this diagnosis, she was able to achieve that state of grace that she dies in. But it's not easy. She's not an angel. She's not just like tapped with a wand of perfection. She struggles, she mourns, she's immature and petty at times. And that was really fun to write too. But in telling the stories, the way that they did, they both end on this beautiful note of hope and promise for the future.
Yes. And man, I'm thinking about things now, but also I think you touched on a really interesting thing, because in terms of marriage, in our long loving marriages, and sometimes the loving goes into quotes, we forget kindness, right? So if you look at how Lauren and Joshua deal with each other in everything, it's the kindness, right? And when you read it like that and you see it in that situation, I feel like it's so, again, almost instructive in how easy it is to be kind to each other, right? And that's our promise when we marry. It's like, you have to be only one thing, and that is be kind, because they are different, because he is, there's also the added benefit of how she, and this lovely like mirroring, where she teaches him how to live. She brings him to life.
Yes.
And then she's going to be gone, and she recognizes that, and she can't just leave him there because he doesn't know how to exist without her, really, as this person. And so that was brilliant. And I think that's really what matures her, right? The fact that she has that responsibility of a person. And then I think the fact that he's on the spectrum was so significant. And, again, as a storyteller, brilliant, which is not a nice thing to say, but as a, it's amazing, because without those letters, there is, and she recognizes that, and that was lovely. And I have to tell you that I was reading this book, and 2 things happened to me, and one is a good story and one maybe not so much, is that I was busy doing my thing, and my husband was busy doing his thing. And he asked me to do something with food. And I was like, why is food always, the whole why is food always my responsibility thing? And I said, can you just not cut your salad yourself? And he was like, fine. And he went off. And I got up and I came in, and he was chopping away at his salad. And usually I would be like, patriarchy, and walk off, right? And I was like, he's cutting his salad and I have stuff to do. So I just kind of kissed him and said, thank you. And I was, which was, such a, if I hadn't been reading the book, I would probably not have done that. So there's that, the way they embody what marriage should be is just beautiful.
I started writing this book before the pandemic, before my daughter was engaged. But I mean, we knew for years that Flannery and Mike would end up together. They were like 18 when they made that decision, and you know, they never varied from it. But I was thinking about, I said to my team at Berkeley, this is not just a book about how to grieve and how to accept loss. It's also a book about how to be happily married.
Yes.
You know, and that's one of the greatest blessings of my life, is a good marriage, which didn't just plop into my lap. You know, you make it yourselves, and it's one of those things that you have complete autonomy over. You choose your person, you create the life together that you want. And, you know, sometimes we choose poorly and sometimes we choose wisely. With me, I was very lucky. I knew, we've talked about this, Sonali. I say like, oh, I was engaged after 6 weeks, and Sonali's like, oh, you amateur. But
7 days.
7 days, 7 days. You had the benefit of your family knowing, and, you know, and kind of, you know, recommending and right behind you. Terrence was a stranger to everyone. But what I hoped was true about him was true. And in Lauren and Josh, they recognize something special about each other that second time they meet. The first time they meet, they call each other out almost immediately. They can see, you know, he's like, oh, there he is, the wonder child of our college, and let me go talk to him. And oh, he's pretty cute too, even if he dresses very badly. And she wants to meet him, and she thinks like, everyone likes me, right? I know how to be liked. And he immediately calls her out for being sort of shallow and relying on her prettiness. And she calls him out for being arrogant and too full of himself. And, you know, they part ways, but that exchange has an impact on them. And when they re-meet, they're a little different for that encounter. In that time, other things happen to them, of course. You know, they don't live 7 years based on one brief conversation at a party. But when they do get together and how they are as a married couple, they're very lucky. You know, one of the things that I like to give my readers is escapism. So Josh is very wealthy. In other words, they can do whatever they want, go wherever they want. You know, they have wonderful vacations and a lovely apartment and stuff. So there's that nice thing. But they're also incredibly kind and loving to each other. And I recently heard some marriage advice, you know, being immersed in weddings, that the first thought on every couple's mind should, what can I do for my spouse today to show them that I love them? Just one thing, whether it's, you know, bring you a cup of coffee or give you a kiss on the cheek and saying thank you, you know, making the meal, or, you know, driving over to bring your partner something they forgot. You know, all the little things that we do make such a difference in life. And so I was saying to my team, you know, I think like every engaged couple should read this book, as heartbreaking as it would be, but but to start to learn, like, it's if you put your spouse first, what a beautiful relationship you can have if each of you does that. You know?
Exactly. And that's the luck thing. But that really is, I mean, you know, maybe one can start or whatever. It is the single most important thing, I think, in a marriage, and across the board, every successful marriage, if you're kind, you know, you don't need the $10 million, you know, that you made before you were 20. So it's in the little things. But I do hate you for one thing.
Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. He has a flower service that sends her flowers every Monday to her office. I was like, if I knew you in real life, I would hate you so much. And if you worked in my office, I would
know, right?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
The sweetest thing. But there should be a manifesto. You know, you should write this manifesto. And one of those things should be that. Like, what a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. Has anyone ever done that for you? Like, where did she get that from?
When I worked in New York City, my office had a flower service that brought flowers every week. So our office looked pretty. And I always thought, like, that's sort of the ultimate luxury. But in Pack Up the Moon, Joshua does it in one sense to show his wife he loves her, but also so he doesn't have to think about it anymore. You know, like he would not remember this on his own. So he'll sign up for a service and it's done. You know, it's a very Josh thing to do.
Yes.
You know, women like flowers, check. I'll make that happen. You know?
And yeah. And if you're going to do anything with your $10 million, that's what I want you to do. Yes. You can keep the diamonds, you can keep it.
Multi-millionaires listening, send flowers.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and a service. So on Mondays, you know, I mean, he took the ugliness out of Mondays for her. Like, but it was wonderful. Seriously, little things. It was just beautiful. I since we're talking about, you know, heartbreaking stuff with this book, we have to talk about the laughs, right? And I think one of the most brilliant scenes I have read in on paper recently, because I was actually like, as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to make me laugh, which I cannot believe she's going to do, is the first dinner that he cooks. I put the book down and laugh. It was because we've all met the Amway guy. Right. It was just brilliant, Kristan. And I'm like, does it just like, are you like, this is a point where I have to do something? Like, where is that even from?
For one, I love food disasters, being a
yes.
poor cook myself. But this is one of the tasks that Lauren gives Josh. It's his second task, have people over. And so he thinks, all right, I can do this. I'll make some Korean barbecue. His next door neighbors are Korean, and he learned to cook from Mrs. Kim. And it's just so awful. You know, it's been a month and a half, 2 months since his wife died. He has her sister and brother-in-law over, her best friend. It's like, you know, everyone is wretched. The sister is falling apart, you know, like hugging the dog and sobbing and drinking too much wine. And Joshua was trying to cook and thinking, like, if Lauren said to do this, it must be the right thing, but it just keeps going more and more south. And the friend brings a date, and it turns out he is like a pyramid scheme salesman. And so, you know, it just goes, Obi-Wan Kenobi, his name is Kenobi. And I just thought, this is the right time. But it also is very natural, that Black humor, right? You know, where you're thinking like, I am in hell here. And yet, you know, I'm going to laugh about this later or now, you know, and
oh gosh, yeah.
You know, everyone I know who's lost someone, including myself, we have gotten silly at the funeral or in the limo going to the cemetery. You know, you just like something occurs to you so inappropriate and so off balance, and you need that. You need to laugh. I could never have written this book without interlacing it with the humor. And, you know, I just think that's life. I think that that's always been true of my books, that, you know, you will laugh, cry, and laugh again. That's my tagline, you know?
Yes, yes. And you push the envelope, and which is the other thing I love, is how every book, you know, you just do these like massive bites, right? Talk about like biting off stuff that is never, I mean, it's just each one of them, like, you continue to take on these really brave challenges, right? And it's
not deliberate. I mean to write easy books. I don't want to write books that are so hard for me as a writer. Yeah, this is a book about life and death, and I never thought I would write a tragic love story. I never intended to, but then, you know, these things occur to you, and you want to give, as an author, you want to give everyone a story, not just the beautiful people, not just the healthy people. Even if that story is sad. And, you know, I've done that in other books where, you know, people that aren't often shown in television, movies, books, they get a story, you know, and, you know, Lauren gets her story of something that as a society we tend to look away from. You know, when you say like, oh, why do you have oxygen? You know, do you have a cold or pneumonia? Or you say like, oh, no, I have a fatal disease. You know, people really stiffen up. As part of the research I did for this book, excuse me, while I squirt my cat. Huckleberry, stop. He's trying to claw through the door. Bad kitty. Part of the research I did, I found this series called My Last Days, and it follows a couple or a person with a terminal disease, and how do they face that. And so there's the, the camera crew, and the young woman has glioblastoma, which is brain tumor, and very aggressive kind. And she's in an elevator, and they have the camera crew, and this poor soul says like, oh, what's going on? She's like, oh, we're making a documentary. He's like, oh yeah, what about? And she's like, my brain tumor. And he's like, oh. And like his floor can't come quickly enough, because what do you do? What do you say to a 30-year-old woman who just told you she has a brain tumor, And he's like, good luck. Or there's always like, one of the things Lauren documents is the stupid things people say. It's like, well, my grandmother had a brain tumor and she was fine, and she lived to be 104. And, oh, my cousin had that and it was horrible,
You could be hit by a bus.
That's a running joke. The poor bus drivers, right? I don't know where that expression came from. My mom says it all the time. Like, oh, we can all die. We can all be hit by a bus. But
I always, anytime you don't want to do something dangerous, because I think you cannot pay me $1 billion to jump out of a plane, right? It's not that.
I would do that tomorrow.
I know you and your gore, and I would nothing. You could do nothing to make me jump out of a plane, except maybe save my children's lives. I would not jump, and then I would die, but then that would be me dying for them. But nothing would make me jump out of. But people will be like, oh, you have a higher chance of dying if you're driving down a freeway.
Thanks.
Like, how does that make the fact that, okay, all right. There are statistic problems with your argument, but let's go there. I loved the doctor's name. So was, yes, our friend Kwana. I loved that. And so do you, with Lauren and Josh, which happen to be my daughter's two best friends,
oh my gosh,
strangely enough, and ironically, but names, how have we never discussed this, but do you get the names first? Like, what happens with the names?
Names are hard because I have written 21 books. So I've used, I have big cast books like you. So it's hard, you run out of names, or I tend to use the same initials. J is one of my favorite, Josh, James, Justine.
Jonathan, one of my favorite heroes from time.
So I wanted, I always like to name the women, the protagonist, a name that I like, and I ran out of like what I would have named my children, 20 books ago. And the men have to have a name that I love. And then I turn to my readers and I say, can I use your name in a book? And I screenshot them if they say yes. So I just do that on Facebook, and I just grab. So, a lot of my readers' names show up. And there's this one character in the book, Lori Cantori, who's a coworker of Lauren. And as soon as she finds out Lauren has a terminal illness, she starts jockeying for her job and her office. And this is a horrible person. And Lori Cantori was mean to me on Facebook, and not in a writer's sense. I would never do that. Like, readers are allowed to disagree with my books. She was just mean about something in town. And I said, I'm an author. I'm a mean character after you.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that just makes it, because that was also like the dark humor, right? It's like, oh my gosh, she's lobbying for her job. Like, wait, what?
Yeah. But I do want to mention something. The book is dedicated to Charlene Marshall. And when I first decided to write about a terminal illness, I didn't want to do a brain tumor. I didn't want to do something common, but this is horrible to say, I did need it to be terminal. So I did some research, and I thought, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, there is no cure. There is treatment, but there's no cure. And I found this wonderful website, Pulmonary Fibrosis News. And there was this young woman, 30 years old at the time, now 32, writing a blog about having a terminal disease, having IPF when you're under 30. And she is the true hero of this story, because when I first reached out to her and said, hi, I'm an author, I'm writing a book, and she's like, well, I'm absolutely into it, but right now I'm in Hawaii. And so I'm on vacation, and like swimming with dolphins and all these, bucket list things that every person wants to do. I'll get back to you when I'm home. And she is, so much of Lauren is her, that grim reality of dealing with, do I have enough energy to go to the bathroom right now? How many steps is it to the bathroom? Can I carry in the groceries, or should I take the elevator? And also this joie de vivre and this Black sense of humor about, I have the time that I have. What am I going to do with it? And how do I deal with the idiots out there? And, it's not always easy or funny or, a teachable moment. It's exhausting to go, why do you have oxygen? It's like, why do I have to talk to you about it? Why am I always having to explain myself, why I'm in the handicapped parking space, or why I need help carrying groceries to the car? So she was an incredible resource. And we've become really good friends now. So I can't wait to go to Toronto and meet her. But she was thrilled that I was writing a book about this, even though Lauren dies. And she knows that she does have a terminal diagnosis, but she also doesn't know when. She says it's very rare to be diagnosed if you're under 30. It happens. There's people in her support group who are 20, they know how it will end, but they don't know when. So that's sort of the inspiration of, so what do you do with your time? How are you going to live your life? You're going to live your life as a sick person? Are you going to live your life like counting the hours till you die? Or are you just going to be in the moment? And I hate that phrase. I was saying it this past weekend at my daughter's wedding. I didn't even bring my phone to my daughter's wedding because I just wanted to be in the moment. But it is so important in life. It's a common phrase for a reason, to appreciate the here and now, and to not be distracted by fearing the future or agonizing over the past too.
Yeah. Keeping your, I had read somewhere, some religious leaders say this, that keeping your eyes where your hands are, or keeping your mind where your hands are. So whatever you're doing right now is where your focus needs to be. And it's always stayed with me, because we're like, hands are here and our, eyes are roving, but that, and I also, it's great that you've done, because one of the things in my notes was research. I want to know about your medical research. And of course, you're ahead of me. I do want to hear because I know there's a good story with the medium, and, and when that's.
So one of Joshua's tasks is to go see a medium, and he's sort of agnostic / atheist as a man of science. And he's very unnerved at the idea of going. And so he does go to Gertie Berkowitz, I think her last name is, the medium, and she has this delightful Rhode Island accent. And she is a really good medium. I don't want to give too much away, but I have a friend who's a medium, and we've known each other now for 23 years. We met when we were both pregnant with our sons, and our sons became classmates. We didn't know each other well. And we worked together at the time. And one day she said, she's very shy and soft-spoken, and she said, I'm really sorry to bother you, and I hope you won't think I'm crazy, but your father won't leave me alone. And I had never told her that my father had died. We didn't, we lived in an area, but not close enough that she would know that my dad had died. And she described him to the letter, the way he looked, what he did for a living, the way he dressed, the color of his eyes, the texture of his hair. She referenced a gift that he brought me from Ireland. It was amazing. It was amazing. So, and I said to her, oh, I believe in everything. You don't have to convince me. I'm right there with you. And I wanted to incorporate that kind of experience for a non-believer. and you know, I believe in the afterlife very strongly. It's part of my upbringing and my philosophy on life. And it's also very damn comforting, right? To think that your grandparents, your parents, your, you know, your children who've died before you, that you'll see them again. And I wanted to bring that into the story. And that was one of my favorite scenes to write.
Yes, yes, it's mine too. That was definitely, and I know we're getting close to when, you know, we're gonna be told we're done. But I did, I did want to talk about the kind of heroine Lauren is, and I'm not sure it's the same reason, but with the book that comes out in July, which was my pandemic book. These are books we wrote, you know, during the pandemic, and I've been. Thank you. I was not trying to plug it, but
I'll do it for you.
Thank you. But it's, and I've been trying to, you know, talk to a lot of our friends and kind of figure out what impact on our stories and our storytelling this really different year had, right? And if it's done, because everyone seems to be writing something a little bit different from what they've written. And when I was thinking about this book, this is the first time I've written a heroine that is completely sorted, like a solid whole person. I've written these messes, right? Women who carry terrible baggage.
Mm-hmm.
And India is the first heroine that I've written who is solid, like who basically
she's fully formed.
She doesn't, like, she's there, she's unshakable, and she's there for you know, for doing the rescuing, you know, to take care of the world and to save the people who need saving. And I felt like Lauren is very much like that, right? She essentially rescues him in death and in life.
Yeah, that's
like
so
his life, right? I mean, she would not, her life, no matter who she was with, would have been some form of this. I mean, other than the fact that he treats her to the T perfectly, anyone who's dying, that's how I want to be treated, you know, when I'm dying. And I hope you know, but I think that the fact that she truly rescues him, first when, you know, by seeing the real him behind the polyester shirts, but through it, like in her death, that is what she's focused on. How am I going to get him to stand back up? And it's so intelligent, every little thing, and so much forethought, right? So here is this powerhouse, like for all the little, I'm Lauren who's cutesy, she's an Obelix, right? She's like this powerhouse. And I was wondering, like, for me, I was thinking, is this something that we've kind of, the pandemic did to us, this need to like write a woman who can save the world? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, the future is female, and women will save the world. You know, I know you and I are aligned in that, and you know, with more women becoming world leaders and in prominent positions, I do think that like we are at the older end of the generation where we will see the end of, and I hope this is true, the end of any kind of bias in jobs and politics and so on, in terms of gender. But she is a rock, and the only reason that she is because of her loss, her own loss. Her dad dies of a cerebral hemorrhage just sitting at his desk eating yogurt one day, and the suddenness of that, again, very much in my own experience. My dad was hit by a drunk driver, never knew what hit him, you know, gone in an instant. And that was what made me become an adult, you know, overnight, just like that, you know. I had to step up, and in some respects, Lauren's mom becomes like that, more of a child, and Lauren becomes the parentified child. You know, they reverse roles, and she takes care of her. And the other powerhouse woman in this book is Jen, her sister, who is just amazing, the world's best sister, and so strong and positive and kind and funny. So these two sisters are fully formed, they are established, but they were again burnished through loss. And I don't know that Lauren and Josh would have gotten together if her dad hadn't died, if she would have stayed sort of that daddy's little girl, that innocence that we cherish, but when we lose it, we really do kind of become our true adult selves. So I love too that she rescues him in life and death, as you so beautifully said, and that, you know, Josh has the hard work to do, but she sets the path for him. And that's why it's such a beautiful love story, you know, even though she's not there for half of the book, she leads him to that place where he can see a happy future. And isn't that what we all want?
Yeah, yeah. And to have that level of, she doesn't just grow up, she just, I mean, the level of maturity it takes, right, to know I will no longer be here and be okay with that. And to have no anger toward those who will be, and instead have this level of generosity to set there. And she doesn't only send him letters. I love that she sends everybody who touches her life letters. So I mean, Lauren really, really spoke to me. I mean, you know, I totally want want to do things with Josh. He is just perfect.
It's super.
But she really is, I think, a lesson in it's how I think it's how I'd like to go. And if I think anyone who reads that book, I think that's the real takeaway from it, that I think. So thank you for doing that for us.
I hate to interrupt you guys on such a roll, but we have some great questions here, and I know our readers and our listeners would love me to share them with you. So we were talking about Josh, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but someone is asking, why did you specifically make Josh a man on the spectrum? Can you talk to how that character came into your writing?
Well, one of my rules of writing is give the challenge of the book to the person least equipped to deal with it. And Disney is our great teacher in this kind of role. So if you take Finding Nemo, you have this cowardly, terrified dad fish, Marlin, is that his name? Marlin. Who needs to set out on this huge adventure to save his son. And he's afraid of everything, and he has to be incredibly brave to solve this problem. So for Joshua, his challenge is to find out how to live after the woman who has given him this new life dies. And so putting him on the spectrum and making him very isolated. He works for himself. He prefers it that way. He's has this tunnel vision with work. So his whole life can be fit in this little apartment that he has. And so putting him on the spectrum just kind of fed into that, you know, that this would be okay with him until Lauren comes along and kind of ruins his life by making him fall in love with her. You know, the life that he knew before is over, and now she's leaving him. And how can he deal with this? So by putting him on the spectrum without being able to read social cues, married to a woman who is so socially graceful, it just made it a little bit more challenging and interesting, I think.
So another question about Josh, and no spoilers, please, but this reader said the ending for Josh was an unexpected surprise. Did you always know where he was going to end up?
I knew, because I'm me, I would never leave my readers, you know, desperately sad. So I knew that his life would end up better and more hopeful than it had been during his intense year of grieving, year plus. I didn't exactly know. That was one of those moments of grace that we writers have about 400 pages into the book, where you're like, wait a minute, you know what I should do? I should go back and do this thing, you know? So I'm glad it was a surprise, and I hope it was a good one.
It's funny you said that, because I remember reading, I guess on your website, about one of your books where you threw out 280 pages because you didn't like what was happening. That's commitment to the story, I have to say. So also in regards to your craft, did you, when you were thinking about Lauren's story, did you write it backwards or did you plan it out from the day they met and work it forward?
I write my books the way people make quilts, one square at a time. So all my scenes are written as separate documents so that I don't worry about, well, what should come next and what did I say on page 34? You know, so I make all those little squares and then I stitch them together. And so Lauren was immediately easier to write, I think because of her optimism. She's more like me. So I wrote her story in linear fashion. And I mean, the book was a mess. I never show a first draft to anyone. This was like my third draft that I showed my editor, and she said, we have work to do. So, Eric Zion, you get a lot of credit for helping kind of pull the book together. So, you know, whatever works for you is the right way to work. That's my writerly advice. If it's working, go for it. It's right. And someone else's way might not be your way, no matter how much, like, I wish I could write as easily as it seems other writers do, you know, where they put out 4 books a year or something. That's not me, you know, I can't do that. Maybe I can do things that they can't do too, but you know, I just kind of know what works for me. And this is my 21st book. So I know that, like, the doubt and misery and feeling like, what a mess. Why did I pick this book? Is there anything else I can write quick? You know, that's just part of my process. And that's just, you know, part of what makes me a better writer, I think, is to not have that kind of uber confidence of like, I know exactly what I'm doing, you know, to accept that this work is a hot mess and I will be able to pull it together with help from my editor.
The old school copy. Go ahead.
Do you always do, like, is each one different in terms of process, or do you do the same? Like, is your process consistent? Because
I do, for maybe the past 10 books, I have done that separate documents, because what a lot of us authors do is, well, you know, we'll write 100 pages and we'll keep going back to perfect those 100 pages over and over again. And we won't write the other 300 pages because we're too busy obsessing about the first chapter. So I write it, I put it away, I start another scene, put it away. And, you know, it's maybe not the most efficient way to write, but again, it's the way that works for me.
It seems very, very efficient to me. And do you know the arc? Like, is that, because I tend to kind of know the overall arc of where the character is going to start and when they're going to end. And that's my guiding force, right?
I do know the arc. I know where the character will end. I don't always know how they'll get there.
Yeah.
And as I said, like those moments of grace, that where your subconscious speaks or a sentence appears on your laptop where you think, oh my gosh, that's it. I think those can only happen when you've really been immersed in the book. You can't plan those, you know, you have to be prepared for that. It's almost like if you compare it to running, which, you know, this never happened to me in running, but that runner's high, you know, where you break through the wall. The wall was always there for me. I kept smashing into it, but they say, like, you know, you're exhausted and and then you break through and you love running, and suddenly, like, the miles pass, I guess. I'm
not running unless someone's chasing me, and it better be a predatory animal.
Right. If it's a clown with a knife, I will run. Otherwise, maybe an hour walk.
It's so true. When you see someone who's enjoying it, you're like, why can't that be me? Do we have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So you mentioned that you wanted to write about the loneliest man in the world. How did you get into his head and into his heart?
Well, you know, we like to torture our characters. All authors do. If they don't torture them, they're not doing their job. So I make Joshua on the spectrum with a very small circle of friends. I make those friends live internationally, so he doesn't have like a posse to go out for beers with. I made him the only child of a single mom who herself doesn't have a lot of people in her life. They have the neighbors next door, that sort of other family. You know, I make him so brilliant that it's hard for other people to relate to him. And then I give him this beautiful love, this life-changing love, and take it away from him. So to do all those things, you know, you really have to learn all those pieces. So I studied autism. I interviewed people on the spectrum, you know, people neurodiverse, geniuses, you know, people who worked in the medical device field, and tried to like learn about every aspect of his life. I read about like all sorts of things that people are trying to make that are so interesting, you know, and give him this mission of like quietly saving the world at his desk in his apartment where he lives by himself, and is stalked by creepy Charlotte who lives on the first floor.
Creepy Charlotte.
You gotta have
In the towel.
somewhere.
He's one of my favorites, right in the towel.
It's like, come on, read the room, woman.
And was there one more question, Karen?
Yes. So this will get your head in a different place. Have you ever thought about writing in a different genre? And if so, what would it be?
I would love to write a horror novel, like a Stephen King, psychological, terrifying little kid in the haunted house kind. I look at Stephen King as like my first writing teacher, because I was a teenager when I started to read him, and my heart would pound and I would be afraid to look in the mirror to see what was behind me. And I would jump into my bed so I didn't have to get close to what might be underneath it. And that kind of emotional grip that he has on us, I admire, and fear is a very potent emotion. So I have all the respect in the world for him. And because I enjoy being afraid of fake things, I do love horror. I watch a lot of scary movies alone at night in the dark where I don't have any neighbors. It's, you know, I love it. I love it. So maybe someday.
How are we friends, Kristan? How are we friends?
I know. How is this possible? Sonali, yeah, well, she does have the world's best dog to keep her.
I know I'm a little jealous too. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful evening with you two and our other guests. Don't forget, there's still a chance to order your books to be shipped right to you. And you'll find the links in the chat box. And don't forget to be both a practicer of love and of fear, and you'll be on the lookout for Kristan's next book. And Sonali, do you have another book coming out soon too?
In July, right?
July 6th. Yes.
All right.
So,
Well, sounds
yeah.
like you're both going to be very happy in July.
The tables will be turned, Sonali.
The tables will be turned. Exactly.
Cannot
Exactly.
wait. Cannot wait. But yeah, I cannot wait for you to read it, Kristan. But truly, if you have not read this book, it will change you. I mean, that's all I can say about it, is that it will change you. And I had so much stuff highlighted here. So can I just, it's not like profound, but I think it's the heart of things. It's from one of the letters she writes him, no spoilers. It says, if my IPF helped bring us what we had, that beautiful, intense love, then maybe I would have chosen it.
But I wrote that. I love that.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I sat on that line for a bit. I sat there. Yes.
Thank you, Sonali. It was such a great evening talking with you and seeing your beautiful face. And thank you, RJ Julia, my local indie best bookstore in the world. And yeah, support your local independent bookstores. If you haven't bought the book yet from one of them, please do.
Someone just said they love all your books, but this one is their favorite. So it's extra special. So,
thank you so much.
and the weather behaved. I don't think anybody got kicked off. So go enjoy your evening and come back and see us really soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Bye,
all.
everybody. Bye, Sonali.